Hello, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere. Well, saying out of nowhere, what a fabulous guest for my show today, all the way from New Zealand. So she's had to get up early this morning. She's on the ball as always is. She's up bright and early as well. She's with us. What can we say about her today? She's a lifelong experiencer, survivor, an abductee, contactee, an ambassador through the stone, has experienced child molestation, trafficking, abduction, satanic paedophile, cult, ritual abuse. My God, we could talk for hours. Can we please welcome Stone Hobbit to the show? Another word, T as well, to the show. Hello there. Let me just put your mic back on again. Your mic's gone off. Oh, it's on. It's on again now. Wait a minute. We're rocking. We're rocking.
Okay, can you hear me? All right. Oh,
I can hear you loud and clear now. Yeah. Well, that's what usually happens. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What a life you've had from the beginning. So the listeners out there can know a little bit about what's happened to you.
All right. I call myself a happy freak of nature. You have to get to know me to understand where that's coming from. I started out as a walk-in. I was doing a job somewhere in the dimensions, and then all of a sudden I was here. And in that journey, I discovered family bloodlines. Let me correct that. Genetic bloodlines.
Right.
And then there was the walk-in aspect. So the vessel, the genetic makeup was designed for another, not myself. But because I was at the time closest match in and with the skills to manage to get through it, obviously, because I'm still here. And there's nothing. There's nothing there that they can do to you. When you wake up and see who you are, no matter what they have thrown at you, it no longer has any power. And it takes a long time to shake that stuff, but you can do it. And it doesn't mean that you don't always have the impacts of these injuries. You just have the tools to manage and recognize what is showing itself, when, why, where, and who is directing it. And that's the best part of going through the CPTSD, the night terrors, the flashbacks. Now, this stuff never stops for me. This stuff never stops for me. All the stuff I ever experienced is always there. It's not going to go anywhere, because that's the program. That was the design to keep certain strengths in stuck places, moldable. You know, we were formed from clay. Clay is moldable. You know, this is not just the physical sense. This is, that's the genetic manipulation of the construct, but it's also the psychological factors, the growth factors, the programmings that they put you through. There is nothing out there that they throw at us that we can't survive and grow from. When we see what they're doing to us, how they're doing it to us, and we recognize the continual patterns, then we break free from them. Now, it's not easy it's not an easy road. It's not an easy road. And that's part of the program. But when you turn around and go, okay, well, today I'm going to be a pirate and this is my ship. Now, what do I need to learn? And then you start traversing it. Now, all the encounters and experiences that I've had, whether they be, enlightening, which 90% of them are, for every negative, there is that positive. I lived in the victim mentality. My father was a pedophile. His father was a pedophile. His actual birth father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia in his 30s. Experimental subject, if you want to say. This is through the genealogy line. And then my father went through some of what I went through with the step grandfather. And so in seeing the process, because he was involved in politics here in New Zealand, Aotearoa New Tyranny. New Tyranny, what does that say? Well, it's always right there in front of us, but we don't see it because there are so many different secret societies out there. Wordsmithing is very powerful. If you want to call it wordsmithing, spell casting, Latin, whatever you want to call it, we go right back into the hieroglyphs, because if we can sit here in front of this screen and think, oh yes, I'm talking to you, you're hearing me, you're feeling it, this is like all these other layers that built up the screen in the first place. And then comes the subliminal messages. Then comes the frequency hits. Now, all of this is right there in our faces, but we are so caught up in the distractions and the struggles and the stress factors, the mast, that keeps us bound to the land, when in actual fact we are known as living creatures, sea creatures, because we spend X amount of time within that liquid, breathing that liquid, not oxygen, but liquid. So, we go from one state to another state. So we've never changed. We need that liquid to sustain our reality. So I stopped being the victim after I recognized the perpetrators, the predators that were out there. And then I saw the programs. All right, I was raised as back in the day, and this terminology has been bastardized now, as an initiate, which meant that from birth I was born into a bloodline where there was going to be some form of ritual sacrifice. My mother was born into a Catholic background, my father Anglo-Saxon. I have got Viking, Māori, Aboriginal. I know tribal. I know nature. I know the innate knowledges of communication with trees and plants. You can put me in anybody's garden and I can tell you what is good for you, what is bad for you, and how to prep it, how to grow it, how to communicate with it. And it's been through this process of getting to know people in different groups and interviews like yourself that I realize, and this goes for everybody because I'm just an aspect of self, and this is the knowledges that we have. We can tap into all these abilities, and at the same time, these are communications that come into place. So once we can move away from the created stuck states, mass Stockholm syndrome, mass divide and conquer, and all the other programs that they play against us, we actually get to see who we are against who they are. And then we get to see the frequencies that we emit, how we learn to emit them, because we've got to free our own rubbish aside so that we can actually hear and go, okay, well, I am actually feeling a frequency. I do hear it. Everybody's told me it's tinnitus, but wait a minute. Now I'm listening to it and it's actually making sense. I can actually see something different. There's a thing, when you get to 8-point magnitude earthquakes, the planet goes into a form of liquefaction. We've got the Titanian times, we've got times before that. How many civilizations have come before us that hit liquefaction and are buried just below our feet. How many people, persons, beings, creatures, have asked themselves, where are the bones of our ancestors?
Mm. Thousands.
Exactly. There's so much more, and we're like a fly. We've only got X amount of time that we're here to gather as much information, and by going through the journeys I have from, I had to grow up living in the dark, and I didn't know it was dark. And so I had to go along with it because I believed, as a child of, sacrifice, I believed
Yeah.
that this was actually happening in everybody's home. I didn't know that it wasn't. I didn't know that this was not how it was meant to be.
Did you think it was just normal then? Did
It
you think
was
it was just a
normal for
normal
me.
life?
Yeah, it was normal for me. When I was at school, and I discovered, and this is bloody horrific shit. Excuse my
Mm.
French. You go to school as a girl, you make some friends. Those friends come home, and before you know it, they're no longer friends. They want to stay the hell away from you. Um, and the boys are different. The boys are different because they're all in that mindset of breeding and all of this. Whereas on this side, those girls have just been abused by not just your father, but also anybody else in these pedophile groups. Now, every single place I ever lived at, there was these groups. This is Australia and New Zealand. I'm born bred New Zealand Kiwi, okay?
Yeah.
and but I also have heritage in Australia and many other countries. But the one that really gets me is my Viking self. And
Yes.
so, I've learned a lot of land-based skills. Now, all these skills that I feel I have, I don't have them alone. I have them with all those that experienced them through their ancestral genes. However, they pass them on to me on a form of communication, whether it was through this form or that form. You know, a predator comes in, takes advantage of you, and then moves on because of that physical interaction. Because we're inside. We are the gold energy within inside these different layers. And when you have someone come in that close to you, and this goes back into the religious side of why we are married to one partner, why there are the rules of all these rules about just being one partner, or just being, just don't interact whatsoever. All these rules were programs that I saw. We build our morals as we go along, and it came down to just tell the truth. Just tell the truth, because one day you'll wake up and you'll go, I'm so glad I told the truth. The whole way through, on every single thing that took place, no matter the distractions that tried to change it. I am so thankful that this journey, even though it's been, tremendous,
Mm.
it's an adventure. It became an adventure when I got to see the who was doing what, all the sister governments, sister agencies, and this is medical, this is psychological, this is physical. I worked as a phlebotomist, a blood nurse for a few years, and then I went into lab technology, a blood lab, and then I was asking the questions I wasn't qualified for, and I started getting slapped on the hand, and I'm like, hey, wait on. I've got to this stage now. I'm asking you a question of what it is that I'm seeing. You can answer me because you don't know what it is that you're seeing yourself, or you're following a script. I went
Mm.
into I went into the deep, nasty side, the darker side of like rapes and you know, home invasion and really
Oh,
foul stuff, really bad stuff.
yeah,
And it was because I wanted to know and understand what it was, why I went through what I did, and what it was that made them do what they did, right? Everybody talks to me, and this has been a big hurdle, was, you know, you got to forgive, you got to forgive, you got to forgive. Wait a minute. I think I've been forgiving long enough to
I bet
know
you
that
are.
nobody is going to come back and apologize for what they did. They did it. As long as I am here in this form, from that interaction, that form of communication, that delivery system, that system that kept me growing in the dark. But wait a minute, I'm not the victim anymore. I can see that by being in the dark and learning all the nasty shit that I did, excuse the French, I tried not to use it, is actually also shown me the another side of the lighter side of it's giving me a choice, and no matter what they bombarded me with and how the temptations and all of these little guidelines that I see as blueprints in the Bible, because I was raised in the two religions. I was force fed these religions. One
Yeah.
minute I'm out there doing satanic rituals
Oh my
as
God.
a child sacrifice, to the next day being dressed and standing there and singing in choir.
Oh,
What?
how
And then,
did how did you cope with that?
oh look, mate, I don't think there's any therapists out there that can actually help me. I have to help myself, you
Yes.
know. In some of these encounters, I lay at the feet of Jesus one day, and I had to say, look, you know, I don't know what it is you're offering, but there's been so many other violations in your name that I can't trust that you are who you say you are. You know, after my son had died from cot death, which, when I go back even further into the, you know, the ancestral side of it,
Yeah.
we go back into Egyptian times when all the firstborn were sacrificed, and that still continues in today's age in families, but people aren't aware of it because they're still stuck in these programs. They don't know about the family bloodline curses that their families bought into. They haven't released this ancestral trauma that had started whenever the program had started. So, you know, we are constantly fighting against all these things. I don't have time to worry about the stuff that I experienced as a child at the hands of those poor those people who could not grow from the experiences they were given. I don't have time for them. But I made sure that anybody who knew me back then, right from going through the child, because this was a cult where children were sacrificed, children were sold. We didn't know what was going on. There's you know, videotapes, there's footage, there's all of this. That I'm not the only one out there of this stuff that goes on, but it's all connected to the societies that we live in, the participation that we involve ourselves in. Yeah, it's not just sitting down watching TV or this or that. You've got to go back and see, okay, what is it you're actually watching? How many screens are actually in your TV? What's the subliminal message on every one of those screens that are coming through to you? If you want to call me paranoid, you want to call me all of these names and labels, go for it. It doesn't mean anything to me. Okay, if you are feeling triggered to use one of these terminologies, you've got to look at your own triggering. You've got to look at your own distraction, your own programs that are going on. There's much more going on than just us getting up, having a coffee, having a piece of toast, and going outside and going, well, see you kids, I'm off. You know, it's a program. Aren't you meant to be growing with that unit that you just created? teaching them the plants that you can eat when all the power goes out, when there's no more technology, when texting is no longer needed because you're sending photos and anagrams of words, sentences, which are now, pictograms, which become hieroglyphs.
Yeah.
When you forget how to read and write, because of all this technology, and you forget how to sign your name. I worked in a village when I was, in my teenage days. Some of the darkest stuff that I went through. We had Aboriginals, Australian Originals, that were living on reserves, not on their land, because they were loitering if they were living on their land and practicing their tribal ways, which I came to honor and respect because of a situation that the programs had put me in. Every time I ran away from home, I learned something new. I learned that home wasn't what it was everybody else saw
Where it
it
should
as.
be.
Yeah. I had hospital visits like you wouldn't believe. I had concussion like you wouldn't believe. How do I keep getting concussion? One day I'm standing next to a trampoline. I'm like 12, 13 years old. I'm standing next to a trampoline. There's all these other kids. Next minute, I'm being stretchered into this hall. I know I didn't get up on that trampoline. I know I didn't get on the trampoline. I had an accident earlier on. Why would I get on a trampoline after I already had this fear state mentality of getting on a trampoline? I still got an egg on the back of my head where I conked myself
Oh,
out. Yeah. And so, these stages of concussion took me into near-death experiences. Being suffocated, strangled, all these little deaths through ritual, because in the ritual days, they would take you to the point of death, and the ritual was complete when they brought you back again.
did,
This is what I did.
no,
Yeah, yeah.
did it ever stop, or has it always been there?
Oh, geez, for a very long time till I said no more. I don't want to be married. I don't want the system. I don't want the emotional attachments, the distractions. I can see the divide and conquer. I can see when you try to make me sign a contract or an agreement. If I get there to that point where I got to sign something, I know I'm too weak to be signing it. Because that's the distraction, that's the catch. So I went into this, and there's all these psychological terminologies that try to say to you, oh, no, we're safe. We really are safe. Listen to us. And it's wow. It's really mind-boggling. And it's difficult to share that much information with someone who is in those stuck states. When we are labeled, when we are the sea creature, because we live in a amniotic fluid for X amount of months, which qualifies us for that, and we take on all these different shapes and changes, the metamorphosis into this form, and then seeing I used to see these auric fields around people
Yeah.
and plants and creatures, and it was like when I crossed the Nullarbor Desert going from Perth to Melbourne, Victoria, back in the day, we were going there because Princess Diana and Charles were getting married.
Oh,
But
God.
as we went along there, the 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 mirages that showed themselves, for me, there were living creatures within these mirages. Then that was the connection to sitting in the dark, hiding from these predators in the dark. People couldn't see me, they couldn't hear me. I could slow my breath down. I could go out of body. When I went into some of these violent situations, I could leave my body before I was suffocated. I got to see that there wasn't just me here, there was also me here.
Oh,
there
me
was there were these different versions.
of
And
you.
yes, energy energy of me, not
Right.
of me, but of energy that made up me.
Right.
And then they showed me the rainbow, and for a long time I didn't like it. And then the Viking side kicked in, and so the rainbow, the Bifrost and Yggdrasil and all these other elements kicked in, and it was plants, it was innate knowledge, it was plants, it was medicine. I saw past lives of myself, and then I was seeing two past lives at the same time, and I'm saying, how can I be seeing this past life and this past life? And this all happened at the same time as I lost my firstborn to what was labelled as SIDS or cot death. And there was absolutely no explanation given to me that sat right with me for why that happened. And
Right.
the spiritual things that took place were huge. It was like an eye-opening for me. I started having visions. I started seeing, I mean, I saw these creatures and beings beforehand, but I didn't interact with them with the awareness that I had after I had these interactions, after these major experiences happened. Like, I ended up with the room of light. There's no walls. There's no, ex-husband in bed.
And
I'm in a room of white light. And then, my first experience with Jesus came down the steps, and he was holding the hand of my son. And it was a want. It was a longing. It was a peacefulness. It was the bliss. I'll never forget the smells and the frequency and everything that I experienced in that moment.
yeah.
I couldn't recall having that experience. I had the belief system walking down the steps, Jesus walking down the steps. I mean, I was going to be a nun at
Oh
one
my
stage.
God.
And once, so when I saw him coming down the steps, it was like, wow, this is real. And this is no disrespect. I don't want to change anybody's belief systems. This is just my personal experiences.
Yes.
When I saw he was holding the hand of my son, that was everything that I believed, that I was brought up to believe would actually take place. And so for me, I was having at that time what I believed as a shared death experience, right? And then when I broke out of that, I begged for it to happen again. I won't be so naive. Let me do this again. Let me come with you. Let me come with you. There's no point in my life. I want to, I don't know why this happened. I've got no answers for it. So I don't want to be here. My son just
Yeah.
died. So I'm like being sucked back into that void, and it all happened again. The light, the Jesus figure, my son figure, the emotional attachment. It was all there. Boom. As fast as I thought about wanting and begging for it to happen. But this time when I went in there, my son offered his hand out to me. He reached his, come on, mummy, come with me, mummy. And there was something very wrong with that picture. That was the picture, that was the feeling state that I had growing up as a kid with all these negative experiences. Well,
Mm.
they were negative at the time. The darker side of my childhood. And I had to pull away from it. And as soon as I pulled away from it, it was revealed to me that this was an illusion. This was an illusion.
Yeah.
This was programming. This wasn't for me. Well, it was for me to keep me in a stuck state, but it wasn't mine. And when I stepped back, it just went gone. And I went plonk. And that was it. After that, all my psychic abilities and all of this, I mean, I've had them all my life, but I didn't know what they were. I would have visions of stuff happening, and I'd tell the other kids, and I would be, oh no, she's on a bloody cloud again. She's gone floaties again. But then it got into, as I grew older, I was aware when I was having these experiences, and I was able to
Mm.
look deeper into the experience. And by doing so, I was able to go, okay, well, I've met you before. Where are you from? What are you? You know, I didn't need names. Names weren't important. It was already a recognizable energy of that being. You know, it became a recognizable energy of the rainbows. I never wanted to be the kid that went over the rainbow. But
No.
what it turned out to be was the rainbows equaled the frequencies, equaled the density, equaled the density. And if I'm wearing a certain color, I was able to tap into that frequency. Then I started seeing orbs. And these orbs weren't just beings, they then came in as ships with beings inside. And I've got night footage of me lying there, and I've got one of these ships coming in, flashing, ding, 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 and it's got a being inside it. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. You really can't.
I was going to ask you about what are greys and reptilians then?
Okay.
Did they come round you?
Oh yeah, yeah. The one I have a not I can't okay not I haven't had any bad one bad experience with a reptilian, but it was only because of my fear state. You know, I was a human pet in the reptilian realm, and this 7 foot, 8 foot tall, tan white reptilian was standing there, just like a lizard guy with a tail, standing there, and I'm in chains and I'm naked because clothing is not, it's foreign. And when when I woke up to going, oh my God, the situation I'm in, I went into fight and flight mode. I had to become protected because it was the use of the shackles, the chains, it wasn't just the solid form of it, it was also the human program behind it that kept me in that situation. And somehow I managed to craft a dagger out of water. I got that from when I was a child. I don't know where it comes from, but that was when I was a child. And I managed to stab this reptilian in the thigh, and he ran off screaming to his mother.
Oh, sure.
That's when I realized I was in trouble. But in that time, that was just one of them. One of the first recognitions I had of these reptilians was just after my son died. I was cleaning up the house, and I turned around and something caught my attention in the big TV. Okay, this is back in the 80s. And I saw a shadow move, and I couldn't figure it out because I was the only one there. There shouldn't have been any shadow there, but I saw a shadow move. So I turned around to see the wall, and there was this shadow figure completely hunched over of what looked like a reptilian being. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And I look back at the TV to see what the reflection was.
Yes.
And then I'm looking outside to see what shadow could create this this reflection of a whatever it
Yeah.
was. There was nothing there. When I turned back to the TV, there was nothing there. It was switched off, and then I turned back at the wall. There was nothing there. So I carried on with my vacuuming, like you do. And then I looked back at it, and there it was again. I turned around real fast, and I saw this massive shadow, and it moved. And oh my, in the early days, I freaked. I ran out of the house screaming. But then it was this, I want to know what it was I experienced. There's nobody else
Yeah.
around to help me. I had to go back in the house. So I went back in the house, the TV was off, and it went. And then the dogs, because I was a SPCA mum for rehabilitating badly abused animals, and one of these dogs that I was looking after went crazy. It went ridgeback, and I'm like, what's wrong? I couldn't even get close to it. Anyway, it calmed down, and over the next couple of months, I had or it was like a portal had opened up, and I had all sorts of crazy entities and beings coming in from greys, showing me that they could use the illusions of our memories to tap into and download data that we had gathered from the experiences, whether they're whatever the experience, negative, positive, they're just labels. It still creates, like, lust still creates the same energy as revenge and grief, and it's what we create. It's the energies, it's the juices. I went into chemistry, I worked in lab technology. I started in plants and biology. Back before I went into actual employment, I was already doing first aid as a child, and I was already working with fixing wounds and bandages. Earlier than that, I was dissecting animals, trying to mummify them, and stuff like this. So I got to see all of these different dimensions were connected. And when the orbs really started coming in, that's when I've got it one picture there where I'm totally immersed in orbs. But then it wasn't the orbs. When you look through the orbs, you can see a reptilian standing over the top of me. You
Right.
know, I had night terrors. I broke out of the sleep paralysis, and once I was able to, it was a grey that was standing in my doorway that put me into this paralysis. The whole light room became, when I broke out of the paralysis, I also became telepathic with that partner at that time, because they were going through it and they didn't know what they were experiencing. And when I could break the paralysis, I broke the illusion. I broke the vision that was my other son. This is years down the track. I had a 3-year-old son. He's now 32 or 33. He was standing in the doorway, but I knew it wasn't him. And I knew it wasn't him because of the previous experience of being able to see that the illusion that they put on, it was an illusion. So I was able to break that. When we achieve just these little goals, we hold on to aspects of that knowledge. So when it plays out again, we're questioning it more and more until we go, hey, wait a minute, we're going to ask you that question now, and we want you to show your true self. You have no reason to hide from us. Show your true selves to us, because we already know you exist. And boom, when I did all this, I did all the satanic stuff. I did the Ouija boards, because that's what I grew up with. That was happening around me all the time.
Mm.
When I broke out of that, I learned how easy it was to use that stuff. It's easier than the technology that we have, but I don't recommend it for anybody. If you don't know what you're doing, don't play with that shit. I'm being serious. Find somebody who does know what they're doing,
Exactly. I've always
because,
said that as well. There's a question from Rebecca there
yes.
for you.
Hi, Stone. What are your thoughts on the fae? Oh, honestly, I've had my experiences with them. I've seen fairies. I was put into this. I was put into this house that had 3 floors to it, and I kept finding these wings about this big, and I'm like, what are these wings? And then
Yeah.
one day we cleaned out the basement, and there's this, it was kind of one of those scary scenes. You go into somebody's old basement that you're renting, and there's this picture of this fairy on it, and I'm like, what? And the place was Pa Road, Onitangi, Wahiki Island. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and I pulled this out, and I even remember who the artist was, but I don't have the need to mention her name. And then after that, I swear to you, we saw fairies. We saw these little creatures coming up to us. I actually do have photos of these orbs that came in that took on different forms of light energy that look like these fairies. So I'm not sure of the connection between the two, but there is a recognizable energy if one's going to take on the same form as a representation of another. So I do believe them. I went into the forest. I've had some fantastic adventures where it's always an elderly woman, okay, most of the time. I don't know if I feel like there's a version of myself within this older woman who's guiding me through this journey to catch up to where she's at so she doesn't have to teach me anymore. If you can understand that or understand that.
Yeah.
I lay there one day in the bracken, and nobody could see me, and I could hear these voices, and they were coming up to me. They were running around me, and I'm like, I can hear you. I know you're there. Just show yourself. I know you're there. Just show yourself. I want to see you. And of course, they didn't show themselves, but I knew they were there. I just didn't have the right eyes to see them. But I still saw the fairy wings. I saw all the signs that I was in the location. I wrote a poem about the last fairies from Botany Bay, how petite they are and how grand they stay. It's like, where did that stuff come from? Same as the dragons, when the dragons came in, they gave me all this information. How are dragons at the same time as the Fae? They're all in the same dimension. They're all in that dimension, and they come together. It's like I've had parallel realities. When I could see that I was a walk-in into this genetic form, and I was seeing, okay, there's my reincarnation, and it proved itself, and then there's the incarnation of the vessel. It's like, how do I work this? Who do I talk to? I'm crazy. I'm losing the plot. But then going through these groups and all this, I got to actually see, no, I have a whole timeline of the genetic memories, and I have a whole timeline of the walk-in memories. So somewhere along the line, there was a bit of damage that took place, and I was able to step in. I've seen myself do and have skills and abilities that I have no training for in this time frame. It's like, Neo plugs into the Matrix. Whatever it was, he gets the system, he gets all this information, and then suddenly he knows how to fight, or he knows how to jump through walls, or whatever it is. It was like that. It was like I was put into some of these situations where if you don't act accordingly, this person might die. You need to disarm and keep both parties alive and yourself. And it's like, boom, it kicked in. And I don't know where it came from. I don't know what it was. But it showed me that there are so many more aspects to what I went through as a child. So many more aspects to each of those perpetrators, each of these experiences. If I stay in the program of victim state, then that's where I'm always going to be. I'm not going to grow from the experiences. I might as well go out there and allow the government to pay me for the injuries sustained from being raped or molested or all these negative shit that took place. It's not going to stop it from replaying every fucking day in my head. It's not going to stop it from the triggers, the words that I hear out there that are designed to do that. But it is going to say, hey, look, this is a system they're going pretty hard at the moment. if you can see it and recognize it, shit, these people are going to come running at, with these problems. And it's not about being able to predict what's coming. It's about seeing the programs they are running and what's happening to the mentality state that's out there.
Steph's just got a question.
Oh, sorry.
So, no,
Yep.
mate, what are your thoughts on shadow beings? What do you think they are?
Okay, I've had some massive experiences with shadow beings. I've got photos of shadow beings. Now, I had them jumping on the bed, freaking me out and putting me into these different states and stuff for a long time. My kids saw them. We went through a stage where I said to my kids, if you have an experience, draw it out. And they'll draw it and I'll draw it. I'll draw from what I experienced, because when it's happening in my house, my surroundings, I feel it too. It doesn't matter who's in the house, animal, mineral, plant, whatever.
Yeah.
And so my son and he's a seer, he was seeing these entities coming in the wardrobe. The wardrobe happened to be one of the portals. And so we drew it out and it was the same figure. Now, just recently I realized, oh my God, the being that was in the house just recently opened a cupboard in the other person's room. Everybody in daylight in this household has seen them wandering around the house. Now, one of my encounters that I had was I was in a dimension where I was on a Grey's table and they were doing something to me, and I pinched the bracelet off one of these Greys as a copper bracelet. Now, it was quite important, because if I took the knowledge of that bracelet that I was told and I recreated it, then I put myself into a loop to be connected to that Grey. So I avoided doing it, but I've always held on to the knowledge about it. In that time frame, this shadow reptilian stepped down the steps into the room, grabbed me off the table. I had finally accepted the fact that I'm having these encounters with these Greys. I'm just going to relax into it now. I want to know what's going on. I've tested my pain threshold barriers, so I want to know what's going on. Anyway, this reptilian stepped in, and when he lifted me up, I'm like this little fucking rag doll in his arms, and he's shaking me around, and I'm kicking and fighting and trying to bite him, and he puts this lock around me, and it stops me from fighting out. And I realized then, because then I'm going like this, dunk, 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 up backwards, so it felt he was going up some steps through the dimension. I've drawn a picture and it's out there somewhere. And that was one of the experiences I had when I went into their realm. I didn't realize, I know now, I didn't realize that the light that I saw going past the glass building across the water was me. I was the orb, one of these golden orbs that come to me that I see. I've got hundreds of photos of them and videos of them coming in. That's what I looked like to these solid matter forms that were trying to chase me when I went into their dimension. When I came back into our dimension and one of them came in after me, there was this flash of light and it stepped through. And as it stepped through, it was no longer a solid form. It was the shadow figure.
Right.
And about 2 weeks after that, a friend of mine, a girlfriend of mine, and I were sitting on the couch, and my door is on that side, my hallway is on this side, and I've got a glass door, and it was open. We sat there and we watched 3 shadow people walk past us, and we saw their reflection of the shadow in the glass door as they walked out the front door. And I'm like, it's time to move out of this house now. But these shadow beings are dimensional. For me personally, I mean, you got to find your own adventure through this.
Yeah.
What I saw came in and communicated with me I go back into their realm. So they recognize my energy when I'm in there, and I recognize their energy when they're here. So they're not shadow beings per se to me. They're energy forms, being able to use our connected energy to sustain their form in my dimension. Vice versa, when I go into their dimension, I am like the golden orbs that come to me from their dimension. So I see myself as a conduit, a communicator, um, on all these different levels, so that when I'm an orb in that dimension with those shadow beings and they need to communicate and they give me the message, I, as an orb now in solid form, can now share that with the orbs that come and communicate with me. Those orbs are not the same dimensional beings as the shadow beings. So I'm a conduit to be able to communicate between the two different densities. And I see that we are multi-dimensional frequencies, and we've got so many abilities. We're absolutely amazing. And this is what's given me the realization that this is why we're coveted. This is why we're so programmed. We're so kept in stuck states. We're not told the truth. We are told the truth, but it's for those that have the eyes and ears to hear and see. So yeah. Oh, there's
Just a quick,
COVID.
just a quick, before we finish, so we can go over the hour anyway. What do you think about the COVID jabs? What do
Oh,
you think
geez.
happened there?
I don't like them. It's like when I was working in pathology, we were also, now I've got the scars on both sides of both areas on my hand. We were being trained to put in RFID chips. They're like the size of the grain of the rice. You can look it up. You can see what they were. But their flaws were, you'd have to remove them and upgrade them. Then there was this chap that came out, and he was able to do, I think it was called origami, where you fold paper folding,
Yeah,
Japanese paper folding.
yeah,
And
oregano.
he was able to fold one, and it ended up being 400 of these things can fit on one pinhead. If you're a tailor or a sewer or dressmaker of any sort, you'll know what I'm talking about. So I researched this, and I had worked with this chap in my earlier days, and this was before I didn't have too much to do with computers at that stage. This was in the early 90s, end of 80s, early 90s. His name was Mabobo, and we were playing around with the idea of liquid nano, making liquid nano hold on to information, become solid form, and then become liquid form again, still retaining the information. We were joked around about it, and I was doing a AAA Oracle computer course because I was going to be sent to Germany at the time because I wanted to modify motherboards. I wanted to make them small. And I ended up having a bad home invasion, which put me back at least 10, 15 years. So that didn't take place. That's all part of the whole targeted individual stuff.
Yeah,
Sorry, I went off track. What was the question?
about COVID.
Okay, with this nanotechnology, the liquid state and areas of it, working in pathology, being able to see what was already in the human blood, and not, they were offering free flu jabs, and they were upping frequency, and we would see changes in things like speed ups of pneumonia, asthma, Alzheimer's, different forms of cancers. All of these were up on the rise. And then when they brought in the COVID, and as an ex-lab technician, there's protocols you've got to take, so that you don't infect your space. Well, when I went to go into the supermarket one day with this whole COVID outbreak and stuff, and there was this chap there, and he's just handing these masks out to people, and I'm like, no, man, don't you realize that if there is a real pandemic, you're infecting everybody? Anyway, that led me down a path, and I ended up with, I don't know how it happened. I ended up with, certified cards saying that I was exempt. I didn't need to worry about this. And I walked around with no mask. I had people taking photos of me, sending it to the police. I had all sorts of crazy stuff happening, death threats, the whole works. I never got sick once, not once, but I saw a heck of a lot of people that I knew dropping around me, right down to the point where they managed to hit our bloodline. And my grandson of 12 years old developed was turbo cancer and had to have his leg amputated.
Oh,
So we got to see the traumas of it, and also working in elderly care with Alzheimer patients, we got to see the effects on not just the patients but also the families, because they were not allowed into the facilities in this area of it. It got really bad, and there was a big turnover. Let's just say there was a big turnover of clients in these rest homes. And when you go deeper, now I know that the whole shedding thing, the whole, you can change it. You can change anything you've got in your system. It's a matter of being able to identify what's going on, where it's going on, and shut the bloody thing down. And there are many ways to do it. I don't go with the whole ivermectin side of it, because working in the field of veterinary as an empath with animals, just another one of those areas they threw me in. There was just something about it. When they go into a silent warfare, there's always two sides, and both of them are just as toxic as each other. So if you don't go for one of the jungle juice remedies, you'll go for one of the other ones. So be very cautious about what is being advertised and pushed out there. The main key is to get to know yourself, what you are influenced by. When I say that, I'm talking about the frequencies that are out there, whether it's Wi-Fi. A lot of people don't realize that they're getting headaches, they're getting nosebleeds, they're getting dizziness, and they're just passing it off as, oh yeah, it's because I'm tired, it's because I'm not eating the right foods. It is about the participation that you have in this. And these metallics that have been put into the system, they are the operating system. For years, we've had chemtrails. These chemtrails are different compounds that are spread they want this in the system. You've seen the trees catching fire from the inside. Now the resin is on the exterior, not the interior. Okay, it's got to grow. The resin's got to get thicker as it gets closer to the exterior. But these trees are catching fire from the inside. And so if you've got these metallics, I'm just calling them particles or metallics, falling on the
yeah.
ground, being absorbed, being gathered within the trunk, and then all of a sudden there's a certain frequency and they catch on fire. What is the difference between the, let's just call it the animal system, between that and that? You're drinking the water, you're eating the food, you're eating the toxins, you're breathing those particles going in. Now, these operating systems are going to need these particles to grow its system. So the whole food chain has changed to make sure that there's higher quantities of different forms of metals, metallics, the necessities for these nanos to take control. I worked in different industries to watch the different reactions, and it goes from If you're in a building and everybody in that building has a Wi-Fi, that whole building is one Wi-Fi unit, and it is beaming. It is beaming. You are a generator. You are participating in that generator. You should be able to tap into X amount of that frequency without having your own frequency there, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that is going on that technologies can be used in some really good areas. There's areas out there where technology is being used, but people turn around and say, the slaves moved the rocks for the pyramid. 3D printing can create a new heart, but it can't create a pyramid. Think about it. There's all these, there's so many different areas. You just pick one area and find something new about it. Don't stagnate and stay in a stuck state. Move on to another area, and before long, you'll see how they all actually interweave. They all interweave. It's a fantastic adventure. It truly is. But you've got to realize that we're going to have ebbs and flows. We're going to have ups and downs. We're going to have these different emotions that come in, and you're going to go, where did that come from? Why do I feel that way? We're influenced by the planetary pulls. That's another subject altogether. The satellites that are out there, there's not just one or two satellites out there.
There's
It's a
thousands.
whole frequency band.
Yes.
And all these planets have these frequency bands around them. Years and years we've been seeing it happen, and nobody's wanted to actually admit it or even talk about it. So anyway, that's another story for another time. Yeah.
Yes, but what? Just before we go, what you got planned for the future with yourself then?
I'm always writing books. I'm always scribbling. I've got bags and bags of scribbles here, which I'm actually going to go through and burn because I can't carry it. It's too heavy. I'm releasing, but I have some books out. I've written some. I've helped write other books. There's some great writers out there who've had their own experiences. Absolutely fantastic. I hold. I don't really want to call them support groups because they're more like a network. And we have one in an hour from now, Half Fire Hangout. We
Right.
share our everyday experiences as well as looking into the deeper aspect of it, because everything goes deeper. Why are we triggered by what we're triggered by? What is the psychology behind it? What's the program behind it? What are the beings you've encountered? What abilities do you have? Are you using these abilities? Are you growing these abilities? Everything, it gets better with practice. And we have practice groups. We have like light language that you hear about. It doesn't have to be the same as everybody else's. I know what I call my light language does not sound like
Anybody
anybody
else?
else's. But I've hit on cancer tumors in people's bodies. I've shrunken lumps right in front of other audience. There's some crazy abilities that we have, and it's about growing them, believing in ourselves, learning about our inner standing of who we are, and going right through the whole karma aspect. The karma not being of your Akashic records, the karma being of yourself. When you step into your karma self, then you can hear and read and sense so much more than the senses we already have. So welcome to the 7 C's.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
All right, stonehobbit.com is my webpage. You can get me on stonehobbit2, the number 2, at gmail.com. If you're clued up, you can find me on Facebook. I don't intend on being there that much longer. I'm moving everything over to Discord. So if you go and look up Hearthfire Hangout on Discord, everybody is vetted because it's a respectful site. We do talk about some very deep, dark portals.
Yes.
different areas. It is about respect. It's not about giving advice. It's about giving suggestions, sharing findings from personal experience, and growing. There's no mistakes. There's only areas for growth. So just look up Stone Hobbit, and I will see you when you can find me.
Have you got any? Did you say? Have you got any books out then, or anything?
I have some books coming out. Yes, I do. I'm already an ex-author. In my early days back in the 80s and 90s, I worked for some companies, which I stepped away from. So I don't even share the titles. But yeah, I'm already a published author. But I've got some other information coming out about my biology, my biography, the genetics, the parallel universes, and the
Oh,
fantastic
brilliant!
adventures of Stone Hobbit. Yep, absolutely.
Sounds
Um,
brilliant.
on my webpage, you'll see a handful of information, photographs. I'm only an amateur photographer. I cover some very deep areas on those when you go there. So you'll find my photos and videos. I've got videos of UFOs, luminous beings, and other beings coming in on my web pages. So welcome to my
Oh,
madness.
brilliant!
Yeah.
Love it, love it, love it. It's been a very interesting show. Everybody in the chat rooms loved it.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I haven't managed to look into the YouTube to see who's there, but much appreciation to all who get the messages, and be well from me to you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for that. My guest on Friday is Beth Lee Crowther. She's an animal communicator. She's been on the show before. She's been on terrestrial TV in the UK. She's had her own show on in the UK last year, communicating with animals, all sorts of animals, by the way, as well. She's on Friday, the 25th of April at 7 o'clock UK time. I will say good night and God bless. You carry on the good work. I know you've got another show coming up soon, so thank you again.
You're
Bye
most
for
welcome.
now.